Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Hallelujah. Woohoo. If we could all rise for a blessing of the Torah reading today. If you're able to, if not, it's okay. Barku et Yahweh hamivarak. Barku et Yahweh hamivarak le'olam v'hed. Baruch Yahweh hamivarak le'olam v'hed. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bakar banu mikol ha'amin v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Yahweh, Baruch Shemo, Noten HaTorah. Amen. And in English, blessed are you, Yahweh our Elohim, King of the universe, who has chosen us from among all peoples and gave us his Torah. Blessed are you, Yahweh. Bless his name, giver of the Torah. There we go, perfecto. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I hope everyone's staying nice and warm and dry in this winter season, both here at Cornerstone we are, and also online. Today is Parashah lesson number 15, which is titled, a very simple one to pronounce, Bo. And it's in Shemot in Hebrew, or in English, Exodus, chapter 10, verse 1 through chapter 13, verse 16. Today's reading that we're going to do is from chapter 12, 29 through 42. We have a volunteer who would like to read this. Mike is here, he's the microphone man. I see Jill scratching her ear. Is that like a bid at an auction you're volunteering to read? Miranda? Yeah, way to go, Miranda. Woo-hoo.
And it came to pass at midnight that the Lord struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of livestock. So Pharaoh rose in the night, he and all his servants, and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. Then he called for Moses and Aaron by night, and said, Rise, go out from among my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go, serve the Lord as you have said. Also take to 32? No, 40. What did you say?
We're going to go, let me click this back.
Is it 42?
It's not working here. It was through, I believe, 42.
42, okay, sorry. And also take your flocks and your herds as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also. And the Egyptians urged the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, We shall all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, having their kneading bowls bound up in their clothes on their shoulders. Now the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moses, and they had asked from the Egyptians articles of silver, articles of gold, and clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they granted them what they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. Then the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot besides children. A mixed multitude went up with them also, and flocks and herds, a great deal of livestock. And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they had brought out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were driven out of Egypt, and could not wait, nor had they prepared provisions for themselves. Now the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, on that very same day, it came to pass that all the armies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It is a night of solemn observance to the Lord for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord, a solemn observance for all the children of Israel throughout their generations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, everybody go on in and have a seat. Did you get the worksheets that we have so that you can go along with some of the questions we have up here? You get the worksheets, they're out there. And pass those around. I think this has the remote control has a range there. Sorry about the pause on our live stream. Followers, good. The subject readings. This is a fantastic section that we were reading about. Okay, we have the 8th plague, which is the locust in chapter 10. Then we have the 9th plague, which is a very interesting plague. A friend of mine was chatting me about that yesterday and this morning. I'm hoping he'll be able to share during Torah portion here today about that darkness. It was a very odd and unique darkness. A final plague is threatened. And then they had the Passover, or the Pesach in the Hebrew. Then that final plague hit, and that was the death of the firstborn that Miranda read so well about. Then you have the Exodus, where they start to leave. And the institution of the Pesach, or the Passover. Then you have the consecration of the firstborn, which is only 2 verses, which is interesting to me. And then finally in this reading, you have the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So those are our sections. So now it's time for me to open it up for anybody who has comments or questions they had reading through the parashah hopefully this week, that some things that stood out to you. I picked this part of the reading because it has so much in it that's critical to us. The Passover lamb, the leaving of Egypt, the beginning of the Exodus, the institution of 2 Moedims, which are the appointed times of Yahweh, and we have the firstborn concept is put in place. It's a very, very important concept, actually. It goes along with the birthright we've been talking about. So Miranda looks like has something.
I was delivered on Passover, my very first Passover. And I was delivered from my idol, the main one that had been driving me my whole life. And it's to the word bow, so it's go or come. But, and at first, it was go away from sin. It was get away from it. And that was the main thing on my mind, just get rid of sin. And I was very focused on how disgusted that Yeshua was with my sin. And he was. The first time that he ever spoke to me, he was disgusted with my sin. And more recently, he has been showing me that he wants a spotless bride that trusts that he loves his bride. And so he wants me to trust in his love. And I have been afraid for a while to say, come, Yeshua, come, Maranatha, come. I have been afraid to say that because I'm not ready. I'm not perfected. But I can trust that he is the author and finisher of my faith. He, let's see, is it Philippians 1:6? That he who has begun a good work in me will complete it until the day of Christ Jesus. And so I can trust that he's coming now that I've left the land of Egypt, that he comes into my heart and dwells here. So.
That's neat. Thanks, Miranda. Yeah, Jill.
I just always found it significant that bo doesn't just mean go or doesn't just mean come, but if we go somewhere, we are also coming to somewhere else. So it has that same concept of, you can't just be on a plateau with Yahweh. If you're not getting closer to him, the enemy is always at work. So if we're not getting closer to him, we're getting farther away from him. So when Yahweh gives us direction, whether it's go or come, it involves like going somewhere, and so we have a destination that we're headed to, but that also means that we have to leave other things. Or like Miranda was saying, when she left behind her idols, that meant she was going towards Yeshua and getting closer to him. And that just, I don't know, that concept really helps to bring it home for me as far as our journey, our halakha with him.
Thank you, Jill. Yeah, Pat.
I was reading chapter 13, and I noticed something that was repeated 3 times, and it's the words, "By strength of hand, the Lord brought you out of this place." And then he wants the people to repeat that. By strength of hand, the Lord brought us out of Egypt. So whenever something's repeated, we're supposed to pay attention to that. They didn't get out on their own. He did it.
That's a very good point. If it's repeated, it's for emphasis and for us to pay attention to everything he says. But if it's done twice, you really pay attention. I once had an encounter. I wasn't sure if it was a message from the Lord or not, but I had the same dream. The first time I woke up from a dream, and I went, wow, that makes a lot of sense. But if it's the Lord, went to sleep, had it again. Woke up, wow, went to sleep. I actually had it a third time, exact same dream. I said, okay, I'm doing this. And later on, several years later, it actually helped bless our family tremendously. It was something that was foresight. There was no way I could know. I just did it, and then all of a sudden, it came in really handy. And so, yeah, I agree with that very, very much. It's a good point. Anybody else? I put this up here so you could see where she was talking about the consecration of firstborn, feast of unleavened bread. It's by his hand he brought them out. Yeah, Joe.
I find this as I read through scripture, but this particular parasha really emphasizes a lot, I think, of how much Yahweh gives us real life lessons. He doesn't just preach to us. He doesn't just give us words. His word is tremendously important, but he wants us to actually live it out. It helps me to understand what our purpose is here on earth, that, we have his word, and his word is even inside of us, which is amazing. But without the practice, being a teacher, I'm always, experiential learning is so important, But Yahweh in his ultimate wisdom really knows how important experiences are. It's not just for our children that we're supposed to do some of those, cute little things. Like we have adults usually for Passover, and I do the cute little plague bags pretty much every year, because I really do believe that we need those experiential lessons just as much as our children do. And certainly that's what Yahweh has us doing there, is remembering, the whole Feast of Unleavened Bread is all about that.
It's a good point. Yeah, Mike.
Something else I was thinking about in this, as she said, being a teacher, it's kind of amazing when we are going through things like they were going through the plagues and everything that they were in at that time, we start to look around and say, Father, where are you? Where are you in this time? And we have to realize, just as when you're a student and you're in that classroom and it's time for that test, that final exam, You can raise your hand all you want to, and the teacher will come over to you, but she's not going to give you the answer right there. She's still there in the room with you, or he, whoever it may be in that aspect. They're still there in the room right there with you, but they're not there to guide you through it. And he says, I'm here to test you and bring you through this, because there's going to be greater gifts on the other side. And it's those moments when we don't see him that he's actually there with us, holding us and guiding us right through it. And we have to remember that in every step that we take as we're going through these trials.
It's a very good point. Just a sec, Tim. It does remind me, I'm really glad, this is really good sharing this morning too. It's bringing a lot of things to mind for me that I will trot through again to refresh and keep them in mind so I don't forget them, like going through the Torah every year. We do that, or we do the Moedims every year too. But it is easy, once you've gone through an experience like this, and you receive the blessings, to forget that it was Yahweh that brought you through it. It's real easy to forget. In fact, it's the Christian custom to pray a blessing before the meal. It's the Jewish one to do it after the meal, because they said it's easier to forget God when you're all fat and happy from a nice meal. You forget he gave you the provision, but it's real easy to remember when you're really hungry and you want that food. And I went, okay, I just learned something. But it does seem to be our human nature to, when we're really in need, boy, you go right to Abba, right to Dad, and then when it's done, you go, oh, phew, okay, good. I'll try to put them back on a shelf or something. It doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. It's a very good point. Jim, did you have something? Okay, I wasn't sure. The other thing, too, is, I put these two pictures here on these illustrations here on the right. Again, them coming out of Egypt, there's so many miracles that they probably couldn't even have thought to have prayed for them. How would you even think to pray for some of those things? And yet the Lord did them. He gave them favor with the Egyptian people when they took that 10th plague to break them. And then they realized, we are all dead men. They had to get them out of the land. They were begging him to leave. And the Lord changed the Egyptians' hearts so that they were freely giving all of these riches to the Israelites, which they were going to need. A lot of them went to building the tabernacle and the ark and all the implements that went in the tabernacle and later in the temple. But they all came from Egypt. A lot of that did. And who could have think the Lord could even change an entire nation that much to pay you to leave when you've been their slaves for a long time? And again, Egyptian rule was huge. Absolutely. It was a major, major power. You can see how they, with leaving out on the bottom and on the top, how big those temples and the walls were. There's a lot of those are still there. They're huge. And yet the Lord did that. And then they went and started on their journey, which is interesting because Sukkot, we think of the feast Sukkot. It was actually an encampment of the Egyptians. I was trying to pin it down again. I went through this last week to see, and there's still a couple of schools of thought on physically where it was. But you could tell it was between Memphis, where the capital was of Egypt, going down over to that northwest part of today's Saudi Arabia, where the land of Midian is. It was right in between. But that was a gathering place. The Egyptians a lot of times would go and assemble their army there, get them all organized before they would launch a campaign north. Through the Canaanite lands, they go up to the Hittites, which was an empire up in Turkey area today. But they would battle the Hittites, or they would battle the Persians, or they would battle whoever it was they were battling, the Babylonians. Yeah, Persians would have been later. But they would travel, they had to gather first, and then they would go up. That's where the Israelites went, because remember how big they were. When they counted it, there were over 600 men. It's like 640,000, 660,000. We don't know how many people were on the Exodus, but they had that many men. So if you just look at a normal group family, there was a lot of people, easily 2 to 3 million people. You don't just whip out a little parade ground and put them on there. It took a large gathering spot for them to gather. Then from there they went into the eastern part of the Sinai Peninsula, got trapped, quote unquote, when the Pharaoh's army came up and there was no place for them to go. I didn't get a chance to go to Nuweiba over there on the Sinai Peninsula, but I've seen a lot of pictures, and I've talked to a few people who've been over there, and it's a very narrow little canyon, very, very narrow. And it starts in a broad plain, then it goes in a little narrow canyon, and then it's all high, rugged mountains that look a lot like these type of mountains here. This picture was taken in a place where it was along their route, right on the edge of their exodus. I mean, it's real desert and wilderness. There's not even sagebrush. But when they dumped out on that beach area, it was big enough to hold them, and it was surrounded by mountains, and there was only two ways. The little narrow way they came, and that's when Pharaoh's army came up behind them. Or, again, the Lord just parted the sea, and they were able to walk across over to, the northern part of the Arabian Peninsula, which is just fantastic. But it even has a little encampment down there, a little visual aid of what it could have looked like for them to be encamped in that area as they were journeying through. Yeah, Marie, you have a question?
I think I just totally realized something about wandering in the desert, and I never thought about this before. But when wandering in the desert, they complained. And I certainly have done my share of complaining in the desert. But it just hit me like, just like their sandals never wore out, it's possible that by focusing on our Heavenly Father, that perhaps they never would have felt that hunger or that longing for simply enjoying Him. And in the past, I've kind of thought of it, and I guess a more material way, like relying on Him for that provision, but just realize that so many of His miracles, like for example, the feeding of the 5,000, so many times I've thought about it as multiplying the bread, which sure, that would have been done, but also perhaps people could have been satisfied with less. That's another aspect of it that I've learned is in the the rabbis and the sages have talked about miracles in that way of people being satisfied with less. And I guess what I'm trying to explain is I just realized that they could be satisfied with just Him, which is actually more, but never mind. Does that make sense?
No, it's okay. Yeah. Because I think the Israelites, I mean, they realized they were going to need food. I mean, you only take so much food with you. They took the bread that hadn't been leavened yet. That's why we observe that with Pesach every year, is the unleavened bread. They had to leave in a hurry. So they did. And they had all their animals with them. Easily, I would guess, 3 million people. That's just a huge, I can't wrap my brain around how big a group that is, but it's huge. Then they had all their animals. That's a lot of food, fodder, water, etc. This is like, oh my goodness. So I think if they went, oh my goodness, that's a lot, then what do? Do you approach Yahweh complaining and whining, which is, we'll see a lot more of how they do that, to the point where they were strongly punished by the Lord, very strongly. Or you say, wow, we have this need. Well, Lord, you gave us the calling, so you will equip us to succeed. Just cry out to Him. Lord, thank you for bringing us out of Egypt. We have this need. We lay it before you, and we ask you, please, take care of it. There's a whole different attitude. So what they saw was accurate. Later on when they went in to conquer the land, oh, we're like flies to these guys. Yeah, that was an exaggeration. But I've also seen some of the places, and you realize how some of the Anakim were. They were very large. It was big. But still, they exaggerated it, which Rick pointed out before. Fear usually exaggerates the problem, and that exaggerated it. Yeah, they had, when they're 4 times your size, that's a little bit of something to think about. But you just beseech the Lord to, again, do that equipping to get you through that. There's a wholly different, to me, an attitude. This picture here was also, just to give you an idea, was taken in the land of Edom. So you had southern Jordan area, you had Edom, which was from Esau, okay? Then you had north of them Moab, which was also the cousins. So what they did was they went a little bit to the east of those lands, and this is down in the southern part of Edom, quite a ways down, not quite to the Red Sea. So they would have been, and this picture is looking, if I remember correctly, it's looking south because the sun's setting on the right. So if you've gone to the left, maybe 20 kilometers, that's where they went. And it looks just like this. It really, really does. And you can see how small the camp can look when you have that vast terrain. If you ever watched the movie Lawrence of Arabia, they filmed that on location. The history is the British version of what happened. But the scenery is accurate, and you'll get an idea of what that area really, your eyes get real big, but all of a sudden you just go, oh my goodness, this is huge. You know? Yeah, Jill. You're doing the microphone? Okay. So Jill answered the first question, what does bow mean? Okay. Now, this is interesting too, is why did Yahweh harden the heart of Pharaoh? I've always focused on Pharaoh, but he also did his servants. And it's in chapter 10 is the hint, verses 1 through 2. I really missed that he hardened also the hearts of his servants. Does anybody got that they can read that? I'll read it here. And Yahweh said to Moshe, go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, that I might show these my signs before him, and that thou mayest tell in the ears of thy son and in thy son's son what things I have done in Mitzrayim, or Egypt, and my signs which I have done among them. That's why he did it in that instance. We read before, Pharaoh was a willing participant and had done it many times himself. So the Lord just kind of worked with what was already there. But he did this so that he could do his signs and show them who he was, saving him by the right arm, his mighty arm, I should say, that someone had mentioned earlier. Okay. Now, the next question, a couple that kind of go together, was the journey from Egypt, or Mitzrayim, to the Promised Land going to be easy? Say what? They thought it was going to be easy, huh? That's a good point. That's a very good point. Kind of interesting. Do we do that? God gives us a calling, and a lot of times, do you guys think it'll be easy at the beginning? Or easy all the way through? I know I do. I've done it many times. I've done it at times enough now to know not to do it. It's what's nice about being older, is I get that wisdom. They thought it was going to be easy, and when it wasn't, they complained. And they moaned, and they, did all the stuff that you do when you're not doing what Lord wants you to do. That's a good point, Wade. Yes, Sue? I think we got to work on that mic being on there.
When I was, my first trip to Israel, I was on this hill looking around, and I go, God, you took one area and stamped it all over the world. Mm-hmm. Man has changed it, not you. And every time I'm on a mountain, I just thank God for making everything, because I grew up in the mountains. My stepdad was a logger. So we were out in the middle of the woods all the time. Mm. And it thrilled my heart so much that God really loves us. And that's what he does. He takes care of us. He does something perfect, and he lets us all know about it. Now we need to open our spiritual eyes, see the truth.
Amen to that one. So it seems like we've got the calling. The Lord equips us. Wade's a very astute point. They thought it was going to be easy. Yeah, I think it was simple, but it wasn't easy. And they really didn't realize that. They had to grow and mature. Their choice was to not grow and mature. If my memory serves me correctly, later on, I think it's in 2 more parts, maybe next one, the Lord finally said, you've rebelled against me. I think the word was rebellion. It's a very strong word. I think it was 10 times. And he said, that's it. So if they'd only done it 9, he would have worked with them, but they did it 10 times, and that was his limit. And to me, that's part of the answer. How did Yahweh show mercy on his children, the Israelites? He was very patient with them, let alone all the provisions. Yes, Ruby?
I think they kind of started out like children, how a little child will sit and say, Mama, 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 I want this. But then they had to learn to speak to God, and maybe through Moses for these things, and he was teaching them to come to him. And the Proverbs are filled with call unto me, you know, so we have to learn to call on the Lord before we have our tantrum.
That's a very good point, Ruby. Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know. I love that picture. I can look at that picture all day long. Just amazing, the land that's there. So now, the journey to the mountain of Yahweh, and my question here was, how did Yahweh give hope to the Israelites that they would leave the border of Egypt, safely travel through difficult terrain to the mountain of Yahweh and the promised land? So I've put some pictures on this slide of people doing that very thing in that area, looking out over the vista, going, how am I going to get over there? Because some of that's pretty rough terrain. You can't always see the paths of the valley that leads you through these rough mountains. And everything there is on water. Everything is water, because there's hardly any there. So your thing would be, where's the water? And then once you're there, where's the next water? It's extremely critical there because it is so arid. And yet, you're in an arid area, but in that little picture there's a little gateway there. And through that is a little mountain, which is that mountain up there. And it seems like the Lord had him there. He said, I'm going to take you here. It's okay, but it's going to take a little while. And then they got there, and of course with the promised land, flowing with milk and honey with the rich crops, and those pictures were taken in Israel, in the southern part, in a community in the northern Negev desert. So you see these, and you can see that one there, that's all sand. Just as far as you can see, it's sand. And then you also had rough places like that where you're going, how am I going to get through there? You got to find those little pathways down and get into the little valleys. They call them wadis, which is a great term. Little canyons or little ravines. So you're in this. This is why they call it a wilderness. You have to have the Lord show you how to get through that. You'll get lost and just turned around. But how did he give them hope? Roy or David? Jill? Jill's raising her hand.
Well, here,
Yeah, there we
Roy's
go.
ready.
Just for sake of comparison, 3 million people is roughly the size of Chicago.
Chicago?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. So how did he give them hope? How does he give you guys hope? I heard some stories that were full of hope this last week. People are experiencing it in their lives. Yeah.
I think as significant as how he gave them hope is how he didn't give them hope. Because he gave them hope through his word. He said, I will deliver you. And he gave promises from Abraham, all the way through the patriarchs that they would get to the promised land. But he did give them signs, like, the miracle of the Egyptians just giving them all this stuff. Like, who would have expected that when they were in slavery just yesterday, But, he didn't give them hope by making everything easy or super apparent. I mean, when they were stuck at the Red Sea and looked like they were going to get killed, things looked hopeless in the world's eyes. And yet, if they went back to his promises and all the things that he had done, you know, before that, like all the miracles and things with the plagues, and they were spared some of the plagues and so on and so forth. I mean, if they relied on all the foundation that he had built, they had lots of hope. But to me, it's important to look at how he didn't give them hope, that it's not going to be this nice little, you know, skip through the park type of thing. There are going to be some difficult times, because that's how we learn to trust him. Then I tend to learn about my own trials a little bit better.
That's a very good point, Joe. While you're getting the mic to David, I really like, that ties into me with what Michael shared earlier about it's a time of testing also. You got the hope, you got the constant contact, now it's time to, you know, he just forged this sword or hammer. If you're a craftsman, you're going to pull it out, you're going to whack that thing. If it's a hammer, boy, you're going to hit something as hard as you can to see if that handle breaks or if the head splits. Same thing with a sword. You try to sharpen it. Will it hold the sharpness that you got? Because a sword is worthless if it's dull. It's got to be tested, and it's usually very strong to make sure it takes the tension. If it's a metal product, they will literally put it in a press and just keep cranking on it and see how much pressure it'll take. Yeah, David.
One thing I found in my ministry and my life is that when I come against a closed door or a pillar or something that protrudes into my view to where I can't see around it, that's when God speaks to my heart. Count your blessings, name them one by one. And when you start counting, if they had just looked back at all the miracles God had done up to this point, it would have got them around, under, over, or through whatever obstacle it was that was before them. Because the same God that did the miracles past, the blessings past, will do that and much more if we trust in him to be faithful. And I think the whole story here is God is trying to instruct them. Look at what I've done to Pharaoh. Look at these things that are hitting Pharaoh. Look at what I'm doing to the gods of Egypt, to the gods of Pharaoh, and see that I am your God. I have called you. I brought you out. I'm bringing you out. So trust in me. I haven't failed you in the past. I won't fail you in the future.
Very good point, David. Thank you. It was great sharing this morning. So as we get to Michael for his next comment, I'm going to just recap. It seems like one of the several things that I'm hearing, God, Yahweh, did miracles for them. That's one way to give you hope. And if you've ever experienced one, you know what I'm talking about. Oh, I feel so much better. Yay. And then as Jill pointed out, he didn't do miracles in other areas to test them, which is a strengthening. So that makes you a little stronger. If you get up and walk around, get out and get used to the inclement weather, you can handle the inclement weather. You can do things better. Okay? And then what was the one that David just mentioned also? Recitation, recite. Not only do you remember them in your mind, you speak them out, which is why we go through Torah every year. That's one of the reasons. We go through it every year. Just think after 30 years, but it doesn't matter. Keep going. We're humans, we will forget, but the reciting, going through these miracles, I don't know about you, but I feel a lot better going forward. It's like, yeah, let's go, Lord. Yes, sir.
So we have a comment from our Arkansas church who's watching online.
Cool.
And Mr. Mike Wilmot is sharing that their journey is like basic training. Most people think basic training is an easy thing, but, you know, studying the Word and practicing the feast is our preparation for the Exodus journey.
Very good comment from Associate Pastor Mike Wilmot and his wife, Yana, who again started a brand new branch of Cornerstone Baptist Church Salem in Arkansas. And they're really, really having a good time there. And it's tough. It's not easy. It's testing, it's equipping, but they have the call. when they shared it with the leadership team, it was all over it. It was the calling they were supposed to do. Now they have to go through all that. And Mike was a Marine, and I think he was in the Army first, then the Marines. Yeah, we have a couple members here who are in two of the services. And so Mike knows. He knows basic training. He knows advanced training. He knows what that's like. Cool. Now, of the two Moedim, which is appointed times, Moed is an appointed time. When you see the I am on the end, im, it's plural in Hebrew. It's, I believe, masculine plural. But the Moed is the appointed time, would be one, and that's where Yahweh steps through. Starts with the weekly Shabbat, which is what we're observing today. Then he goes in to they're all feast days except for one, because Yom Kippur is more of a day of atonement. But all those are appointed times that Yahweh sets forth. That's his part of his love language to me, is we go to him and we do what he wants us to do on those appointed times. Two of them are official, made official here. And my question to you would be, what do they signify? First, what are they? Who's got them? Guys are all really quiet. What's the first one? Passover. Passover, very good. Or Pesach in the Hebrew, it's the first one. What was the second one? Feast of Unleavened Bread. Right, so that's two. Okay. And do you know what they signify? I can't hear you. Without a microphone, I don't know what's going on.
Atonement. and it-
Atonement is Yom Kippur.
Right,
That's in the fall or late summer. So Passover is what? It's in this Torah reading what happened. This is why you go over it. This is fine. We're going to go over these things and get them anchored into you there. Yes, Tim.
I was going to say, if you look at 13, verse 9, it seems to have an answer for that. It says, "It shall be a sign to you on your hand and a memorial between your eyes, that Yahweh's Torah may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand Yahweh has brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this ordinance in its season from year to year."
Excellent. You get an A for the day.
And it's kind of interesting because Yeshua said, whatever comes out of your mouth, that's what's in your heart. So if the Lord's Torah and the Lord's word, Jesus' word, just all that's coming out of our mouth, that's what's in our heart. So that's what we meditate on. Which is pretty cool. So it's sometimes I'll just read it out loud.
So we do those two, and we have some more in the springtime and early summer with Shavuot, or in Greek, the Pentecost, right? Those are in remembrance of what did happen, okay? And then the fall ones are what's going to happen, and I'm still working as a good working theory that a lot of people believe, I agree with it, that when Yeshua came the first time, he fulfilled the spring feasts. And also, because the one's in June, so it's not really technically spring, it's into the summer, but it's the earlier grouping. When he comes the second time, he's going to fulfill the fall ones. And I understand people will say, well, he lived among us, so he fulfilled Sukkot. And I do get that. But he also left. He left. And if you look at the head of the new year that is celebrated today, it's a civil new year, but it's actually the Feast of Trumpets. And then you have Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And the Day of Atonement is a group thing. It's not an individual thing. Those have not happened yet. So yes, he did Sukkah with us for a little while, and it was fantastic. But he went away to prepare a house at his father's house for his bride, and he's going to come back. And then the trumpets are going to announce his coming. Then he's going to do the judgment stuff. Then we get to live with him. And then actually we really do get to live happily ever after at the end of it, which is kind of fun. But we got to remember those. Those are key markers. Those are markers to tell us what's happening and what's going on. And two of them are instituted here. So now we'll bring it back to what Pastor Rick has encouraged us to do, and I completely agree. One's where Yeshua in this, but also how's this relevant to us today? Before we get into that slide, Mike, did you have something there? You got to remember, I'm like an auctioneer. I'm looking for tugging of the ear,
Pastor
wiggling of the
Rick.
little pinky on the program. Okay, there's a bid.
Pastor Rick, who's watching online, in answer to your question about what the Moedims are about, he said it's about the blood and not mixing in the sin. The blood is really important.
Yes, and I completely agree. Thank you, Rick, for sharing that. Because you have the blood of the Passover. They did the doorposts, which is like the sheen letter. And if you didn't have it on there, the angel of death came and whacked your firstborn. Animals, humans, didn't matter. Yeah, the blood that protected them from death. It protected them from death. And then, of course, you have the sin, which is missing the mark, like archery, you shoot, you miss the mark. I took archery in college, I had a lot of fun with it, but I understand that phrase because I know what it's like to miss the whole target. Oops. And then I go, I sinned. And remember looking at me, David, you taking this class too serious? I said, no, in Hebrew. And I'm trying to give them a lesson. And they said, yeah, just go shoot the arrow. So I did. But I understood it. And if you've ever hunted archery, you know what it's like to miss a deer or something. Yeah, you miss the mark. But sin is leaven. So when they had unleavened bread, yes, it was practical, but it had the meaning that Pastor Rick is talking about. Because and it's kind of funny, what does leaven have to do with sin? Somebody pointed it out to me once. And that was, leaven puffs up bread, right? Fills it with air. So it's puffed up without substance. There's nothing there but air. It's the same amount of grain that was before. So it's puffed up without substance. That's sin. It puffs us up, but there's no substance there. So we do need to keep the sin out so that our bread doesn't become leavened, which is why we eat unleavened bread and get all the leaven out. Yes, Jill.
So I'd actually be interested to hear more of what Pat was saying about atonement, because based on what you just said about the leaven and also Rick's comment about the blood, all tied up within these two Moedim, I do think that atonement is part of these Moedim that, and with any time we are called to approach Yahweh in any manner, that there has to be some atonement there, but especially with the blood of the lamb and getting that leaven out of our lives, that there's something to be had there.
That is a very good point, Jill. Thank you for pointing that out. It's a very good point. Now, I chose this picture because I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when I'm working something with the Lord, it seems like this is what I'm doing. Can you guys all see the guy in there? There's a teenager in there climbing that mountain. Do you guys see him? And I zoomed in when I took this picture. You should see how big the place is. It's huge. I just went, they're going where? Oh my goodness, I hope they don't fall. It was way huge. And there was a girl 4 years younger than him with him when he did this. But I put this in there, he's right there in the middle. As you work and struggle, because sometimes it is a struggle, to become closer to Yahweh, how is this parashah lesson relevant to me today? Yeah.
Just to continue real quick, Rick commented and said that the leaven disqualifies us for Passover as well. And atonement was for sin after Passover.
Interesting. Very interesting. So when you guys are in something like this, okay, remember what he's done for you in the past. Have hope. Faith is another way really to state that, but have faith. If he's got the calling and you're called to go up this mountain, then that's what you do, and he will equip you. Sometimes he'll, put your hand there. There's your handhold. Now put your foot here. Now stand up. Oh, it feels weak, because I did a little bit of rock climbing once. No, just stand up. It will hold you. And then go this way, because when your face is against that rock, it's hard to see up very much. And if it's slightly curved, you can't see over the curve. You can't see sometimes more than 3 feet. But someone on the ground could go, oh gosh, he's going the wrong way, or oh, we should go this way, So you rely on the Lord to show you how to get there. Yes.
So Pastor Rick said, sorry, what was the last part? No. So after Passover. So I looked up the definition of atonement, and this dictionary definition says reparation for a wrong or injury, the reconciliation of God and humankind through Jesus Christ. And then is there a difference then? Are we also talking about justification, and then there's atonement, and there's separation there? Do I need to wait for Pastor Rick to type up his answer?
Well, you're giving him good good food for another talk when he's out, not feeling too well today, but, that's always a great sermon topic. But has he got one there?
He hasn't yet.
Okay.
We'll let him.
Now, we're almost out of time, and Pat's got a comment, and then I'll go to our very last slide. Yes, Pat?
What I think is very relevant in this portion is how it's illustrated that Yahweh distinguishes the children of Israel from the Egyptians, and the plague of darkness is a great example.
How is that?
The Egyptians were in thick darkness, and the children of Israel had light. And we are the children of light, and we're not to look like the world.
Exactly. That is a very, very good point, Pat.
I love that you just commented that, Pat, because Tim was discussing that in the Oneg room before service.
Yeah, it's very, very true. So, and again, the picture on the left is, you could see the ground, how it cracks. It's one of those places. There's a place in the Mojave area of Southern California that does this. It is so dry, the ground cracks, and it stays that way. It can stay that way for 5 or 8 years. And so my question here is, and this is in the land of Edom, very close to right next to the Arabian desert. Where is Yeshua with the Israelites in this parasha account? And I put that picture to show you what the terrain looks like. And in a sense, you're the person in the middle. And the person on the right would be Yeshua. Where is he? He's right next to you. This terrain, you don't mess around out there. You really don't. It's like being in Alaska in the Arctic area in the winter. You don't mess around. And yet, she's there. She's got the equipping. She has a beautiful Arabian stallion that she was riding actually in an endurance race there. But it really shows me a symbolism. And where's Yeshua? He's right next to you. You guys remember the poster of the footprints? That David remembered the way, yeah, those of us who are oldie moldies kind of remember that better. And someone had 2 pair of footprints on a beach, like where the waves are, and then they go along, and then pretty soon they join together in 1 pair. And you go, Lord, where did you go? You were with me, but where did you go? And he said, those are my footprints. I'm carrying you. Yeah. And the picture on the right, that's that mountain that he climbed. And he's up there looking out over the vista and took some of the pictures that you've seen in here. It took him quite a while to get up there, and it wasn't an easy climb. A couple times he had to pause and look around and stuff. But he was up there looking. She was right there with you. When you're in the trenches, you're in the foxhole and everything's hitting the fan, sometimes it's hard to remember that he's in there with you. That's the difference. Now that we are children of his, he will be with us. He'll save us from some of those experiences, but some of them we still got to go through. But he's there with us. That's the difference. It's a huge difference. It makes it all worthwhile. We got one more, and then...
Mike Wilmot said, and he's also the compass, the only way we can find our way out of the desert.
Yep. I would agree. That's why when you're like the one picture when he's looking at it, and it's all these craggly, it's like, which way do I go? Or when he's climbing up, go left, go right, go here, go there, go there. Ah, there it is. But he will do that. So we went a little bit longer, but I think this was an important lesson. You guys had some great stuff to share. I'm very excited about that. That's the purpose of this. Get you to think, get you to share. Good job. Very good job, everybody. So with that, we will conclude our Torah Midrash. Again, which is a discussion format. And Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and we'll be back in just a few minutes with our second live stream.